Hi, I'm David Riley, and
I'm Nicholas Harvey. Welcome to Three Distinct Knocks, maybe?
maybe.
Well, you didn't say welcome.
I thought we could introduce ourselves and then welcome people.
Who says that? What do you say? Nicholas Harvey. Hi. Or do you say, hi, I'm Nicholas Harvey?
See, doing things in the right order is important, isn't it, Nick?
This is weirdly going to be on topic for tonight. I even planned that.
I'm a genius. Welcome to
Wait, did you really do that on purpose?
You'll never know. Welcome to Three Distinct Knocks. Tonight we're going to be talking about preserving harmony in lodges, preserving order, and using the rules of parliamentary procedure, properly known as Robert's Rules of Order. And I promise you, it's not going to be tedious or boring. So please listen. But before we get to all of that, first, the rant. Masonic lodges are tender creatures, swift to feel the bite of frost. They require more attention and care than the most demanding of flowers. They grow slowly, wither swiftly, and even when having survived decades or even centuries, are quick to fade if neglected. Nothing is more poisonous to a lodge than disharmony. When the members of a lodge forget that they are brothers, bound together by sincere ties of affection, the lodge begins to die. It is so easy for a man to simply decide it is too much effort to come home from work, change into a suit, and go to lodge. It is so easy for a man to decide that the lodge will do well enough without him. It is so easy for a man to slide from regular attendance at the meetings of his lodge to occasional attendance, then rare attendance, and then not attending at all. And it is so much easier to do this when disharmony gives him reason to feel unwelcome in his lodge or uneasy about its proceedings. Harmony, we are taught as Masons, is the strength of all institutions, and especially of our beloved fraternity. It is because of the desire to preserve harmony and order that the rules of parliamentary procedure were developed. In the British House of Commons, the distance between benches for members of the government and benches for the opposition are said to be just slightly more than 2 sword lengths apart. Testimony to a time when debate on legislation might be easily pursued by means even more cutting than English wit. We are only human, and it is inevitable that even in our lodges, we will sometimes disagree. Some may wish to carpet the lodge room, while others may want it to be tiled. Some may wish to have those old benches upholstered, while others, their eye on the lodge's account balance, want to put that off for a few more years. Brothers can disagree. Brothers do disagree. What matters is how we disagree. Simple measures like addressing all comments to the chair are meant to keep matters impersonal and focused on issues rather than people. The elaborate courtesies and forms observed in Houses of Parliament, in the U.S. Congress, and in our lodges are meant to remind us to keep our passions within due bounds. In legislative bodies, it is said that the rules exist to ensure the minority is heard and that the majority prevails. This is, to an extent, true in Masonic lodges as well. But we have the additional concern of ensuring that harmony and brotherly love prevail. For this reason, the master of the lodge is given in many jurisdictions extraordinary powers to preserve the harmony of his lodge. No legislative body would tolerate their presiding officer having such powers. But in a lodge where our care is not just for the rules, but for our brothers, it is entirely right that the master should be empowered to act to preserve the dignity and goodwill of the members of his lodge. The spirit of a lodge, its egregore if you like, suffers greatly when voices are raised and anger stirs. A lack of good order, a failure to understand how a topic is debated and voted upon, can lead to confusion that causes hurt feelings. Poor communication increases the chances of hurt feelings. A lack of clarity in how matters are conducted increases the chances that someone will feel they were treated unfairly. Good order, therefore, helps preserve harmony and protects the egregore of the lodge. And let's face it, Knowing the proper procedure and proper phrasing allows us to look informed, intelligent, and capable. And isn't that something we all desire? Because lodges must exist in the profane world, with its concerns over real estate and paying electric bills, there will always be difficult issues pounding at the door. We should tile our lodges, however, against the contentiousness that marks the profane way of conducting business. Let us observe the correct forms. Let us offer the proper courtesies. And while we cannot always avoid having some of our brothers be on the losing side of a vote, let us remember that we are brothers and act with care, compassion, consideration, and genuine love towards all those with whom we share the title Mason. Well, that was a surprisingly subdued rant.
Yeah. We might not even get in trouble for that one.
So what I want to go over is the proper way to do things in lodge, how to make a motion, all that kind of stuff. That it's not just about lodge, it's also about any civil society you belong to. The Rotary Club, your city council, all those things. Now, lots of Masons will tell you that as Masons, we don't follow Robert's Rules of Order. And that's both true and not true.
Why would they say that?
It's true because in many jurisdictions, the master has authority that Robert's Rules of Order does not give the chair. Mm-hmm. For example, in most Masonic jurisdictions, the master of the lodge is free to express his opinion on a topic, right?
Yeah.
You often hear the master say, I think we should blah, 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 right? And Robert's Rules of Order, that would be considered abuse of the chair. The chair is meant to be impartial and not express an opinion.
Oh.
That's the reason why in Congress, when you see the Speaker of the House expressing his opinion on a piece of legislation, he steps down from the rostrum and somebody else presides while he does that. Mm. Because the chair is supposed to be impartial and not involved in the debate, right? But in a Masonic lodge, the master is empowered to have an opinion. Another example would be that the master of a lodge in most jurisdictions, and with all of this, we should start off by saying, this depends on your jurisdiction, and you should learn the traditions of your lodge and the regulations of your jurisdiction first, and then come back and look at what we have to say to see how it matches up. But in most jurisdictions, the master of a lodge can put a question to the lodge without calling for a motion and a second. So the master can simply say, for example, in I haven't observed closely enough how it works in other jurisdictions where I've seen petitions or applications voted on. But in Massachusetts, the master never asks for a motion or a second to vote on a petition. He simply puts the question.
What's the question of?
We are now going to vote on
the
application of Mr. So-and-so to receive the degrees of Freemasonry in this lodge. Brother Senior Deacon, you will prepare the ballot, right? There's no motion there. He's just making the motion.
Oh, interesting. I gotta look into that. Interesting.
So that's common in Massachusetts. I think in some other jurisdictions, they actually do go through the form of asking for a motion in a second. But the master generally can do that. The master can table things without any vote of the lodge. Now, in Congress, and we should be clear in case we have any international listeners, table in American context means one thing and in British context means something else. Just to make life confusing, so in America,
it was they
did it. In America, to table something means to take it out of consideration and put it away for another day.
Right.
And often the thing will never return, right? In British language, to table means to take it up and to begin to debate it, because you're putting it on the table for debate. So we have two different meanings. We're going to stick with the American usage. So the master has the ability to remove a topic from debate and to do it quite abruptly, actually, if it's causing disharmony in his lodge, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, if we have a real good argument going and people are starting to get heated, The master is perfectly within his authority to end discussion, not allow a vote on the topic, and move on to something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously that's not going to work in Congress, right?
Right.
So we don't follow Robert's Rules of Order in some specific ways, but the general form of Robert's Rules of Order, the general way that we proceed to do stuff, the issue is it's so common sense, it's so basic that there's no way you can have an organization that votes on things that doesn't follow Robert's Rules of Order.
Got it.
Because it's just a way of making sense. So what we're going to do today, I thought this would be a more interesting way than to explain some of the issues that crop up in lodges without just boring people to death with details, is to see if we can vote to amend the dues for 3 distinct knocks.
Okay.
Right, yeah. So, because let's face it, what's the most contentious thing you can do in any lodge? Vote to amend
definitely
the
dues. Yeah, definitely dues.
Totally brings out the worst in people.
Brings out the worst in everybody. I mean, you see people you've never seen before.
Yeah,
They just come out of the grave, walking in the lodge with dirt on their feet. Like, somebody put flowers on my grave and said we're voting tonight. I am here.
Yeah. So in addition to that issue, we also have the issue that people often get quite passionate about these things.
Yeah.
In the episode on finance, Ernie observed that people, I think he talked about this. He's talked to me about it before anyway. He talks about the fact that Masons all have this habit of constructing the Mason that this will affect in their heads without any regard whether that person actually exists or not.
Yeah.
And so, when we raise dues, we all worry about the guy who's on a fixed income, who's an older member of the lodge who can't afford it. Whether or not the lodge actually has such a person or not is completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
People's passions get heated up. So how you want to make a motion to increase the dues? What do you do?
All right, we'll skip the whole, I'm not an officer or something, and I asked them for permission, and they're like, fine. So then I would be like, I have an idea that I want to bring to everybody.
Shouldn't the chair recognize you first?
Oh, okay. We're really going back to this. All right.
So
I would stand and wait to be recognized by the worshipful master.
Brother Harvey.
And I would pay his respects to his chair.
In whatever way is appropriate in your jurisdiction or for the body that you're working in, correct?
Right. And then I would say I would like to bring up a discussion of possibly raising our dues.
So in a Masonic context, that's often how we start things.
Right.
And that's, and fair enough. I would add for novices that may be listening to this, every guy who's been a member of a lodge for long enough knows that there is nothing worse you can do in a Masonic lodge than to surprise the master.
Oh, yeah.
Because that gavel is going to fall really quickly, and he's not going to want to hear any more from you for a couple of days so presumably you've talked to him in advance and all that kind of stuff. But we often have sort of these free-flowing discussions in Masonic lodges.
Right. Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah, and Robert's Rules of Order hates that too, and it has a real simple solution for not allowing it to happen, which is, what are you discussing? There's no motion on the floor. There's nothing to discuss. So unless someone has made a motion under Robert's Rules of Order, unless there's a specific thing to talk about, you shouldn't be talking. So the first thing that someone would do would be to stand and say, I move that we raise the dues from their present level of 0, because nobody's paying dues to 3 distinct knocks now.
Hey, some guys are Patreons.
Supporting
our Patreons, thank you.
Our Patreons are voluntary dues payers, I suppose, that we raise the dues to $100 per year.
Okay.
All right. Now there's something to talk about. Now we can discuss raising the dues. Right. $100 per year sounds like a lot to me, doesn't it? That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. But before we can discuss it, somebody else has a second.
Right. And so we'll assume somebody seconds the motion.
It's always the same guy.
Well
too.
done.
It's
Yeah,
always the same
I
guy.
love that in Masonic lodges there's a race to second.
Why?
I don't know, because as a secretary, I never one of the things that I was taught early on as secretary is never to record who made a motion and who seconded it, because unless whether it passed or failed should be recorded.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, so I don't.
It drives me nuts.
I think it's their way of participating without having to do any work.
Yeah, I guess. All right. So second, and then it says, is there any discussion?
Right. And then somebody stands up and says, "Wow, $100, that's a lot of money."
Right.
What about some of our older members who can't possibly afford that? Like the guy who lives in the mansion down the street.
Yeah. Yeah. Who hasn't been to lodge in 50 years.
Right. So maybe somebody would like to, and we should say the reason you always ask for a second is because Robert's Rules of Order recognizes that the same problem exists in society at large that sometimes exists in Masonic lodges, which is you have that one guy who has a pet peeve and he will keep bringing it up and nobody else is interested in it.
Got it.
So requiring a second is a way of making sure at least one other person in the room wants to talk about this, right? So now you might want to make a motion to amend, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's discussion, right? And then this dude had a thing, and then this dude had a thing, and then somebody else stood up, and now he said, "Well, what if we do this?"
Right. What I move that we amend
Right.
the motion to say the dues will now be $50 instead of $100.
Okay.
Okay. So what you have to do in your head is think of it as everything falling into a list.
Right.
And the main motion to raise dues to $100 is here, and your motion to amend to $50 is here. Okay.
Right.
So now you're going to talk about the $50.
Right.
You're not talking about it, provided it's seconded.
Yeah.
And now you're going to talk about the $50. So somebody could stand up and say, "Well, I think we should have dues paid." In fact, I move that we have the dues paid in 2 payments of $25 instead of 1 payment of $50. I move to amend the amendment.
Can't do that.
Yes, you can. You can amend amendments. You can have an infinite string and you just keep dropping down one level each time and talking about that thing. And so we say, is there a second to the motion to amend the amendment?
Right.
Hearing none,
The motion.
the motion
Okay.
fails.
Right.
Now we're back on the
$50.
motion to amend the main motion to have the dues be set at $50. And we're going to vote on those in the reverse order in which they were proposed. So you vote on the amendment to the amendment before you vote on the amendment,
Right.
and then you vote on the main motion, which makes sense because you want to get the main motion has to be modified all the ways that it's going to be modified before everybody agrees.
Before everybody agrees, because if someone didn't agree, that
Right, exactly. So it all makes kind of sense if you think of it as just creating a list and then moving up the list.
Right.
Now, what you'll often get is people saying, you'll get 45 different things going and different numbers out there, and it gets really complicated, and people are amending the amendment. And if it gets to be burdensome, there's a procedure in Robert's Rules of Order that isn't used much, but that is helpful sometimes, called creating a blank. And creating a blank works like this. You say, I move, in fact, we did it in our York Right bodies.
Okay.
I moved that we change the dues
Right.
to blank.
Got it. Yeah. I remember.
And then
that.
people can propose numbers.
Right.
And then you vote on the numbers, all those in favor of 10, all those in favor of 100, all those in favor of 50. And the way it usually works, and it's subject to some other, your bylaws and other provisions, but is the one that gets the most vote becomes a motion. And then you proceed with that. Sometimes if the votes are close, you might eliminate the ones that didn't get very much in the way of support and then have a runoff between the two top ones or something like that.
Revote, yeah.
So there's a little bit of flexibility in how you approach these things, especially in a Masonic context where we're not strictly bound by Robert's Rules of Order. So creating a blank is a fun way to, in essence, creating a blank is what you're doing when you elect your elected officers. You're saying, I move that the worshipful master for this lodge for the ensuing Masonic year be blank.
Blank, yeah.
And then people nominate that person and you vote to see who's going to fill in the blank, right?
What do I do if someone's opposed to it, but they're kind of just, it kind of sounds like they're trying to like filibuster it or whatever, or they're just talking nonsense and there's no, like he's like, raise the dues, can't raise the dues. When I was master in 1972, the dues were $2 and no, we can't do it. Like there's no real substance there, but he's still.
Right. So that's really, in a Masonic context, that's really up to the worshipful master to handle. And what the worshipful master has a couple of options for ways to handle that. One way, which I rarely see used in subordinate lodges, but which is common in grand lodges, is to limit the time. Right?
Oh, cool.
So you say, I will hear, and traditionally you move back and forth between people speaking in favor and people speaking against.
Right.
So that everyone gets a chance, and it makes it a little more sensible. So when he starts going off topic and really is straying, the worshipful master may gently remind him. What we're talking about now is raising the dues today. While we appreciate your experience, brother, 1975 doesn't seem relevant to the current conversation.
Okay.
If he keeps going and keeps rambling on, the worshipful master can cut him off gently. You should say pounding the gavel and causing the guy to, Masons hear one rap at the gavel and their feet fly out from under them and they sit down. It's like Pavlov's dog.
Yeah.
But you should reserve using the gaveling somebody down for times when you really have to stop them.
Yeah.
Instead, you can just interrupt him gently and say, thank you very much for your thoughts, brother. Does somebody else? and switch it that way. If you have a whole bunch of people standing up and agreeing, something that I don't see worshipful masters do, and I don't understand why, you have 40 guys stand up and all say, this is great. I approve of this. I think we should do this. And person after person is saying the exact same thing. The worshipful master should say, does anyone wish to speak in opposition?
Oh.
Everybody has spoken in favor, and that's great. It's wonderful to see all the, the unanimous opinion of our lodge come together, but does anyone wish to speak in opposition? Because there's no reason for us to keep saying what a good idea I've had.
Yeah.
As much as I like to
As
hear.
much as we all like to admit it.
So that's a useful way to corral things. In general, in a Masonic context, we let guys talk as much as they want, as many times as they want.
Right.
In subordinate lodges. In grand lodges, it's generally speaking a rule that you get one shot on a topic and that's it, if any.
Yeah.
Right? We're not so big on letting people talk us all to death in grand lodge.
Yeah.
I think subordinate lodges would do better if the worshipful master simply said, I'm going to recognize people to speak for the first time, and I won't recognize people to speak for a second time until everyone who wishes to has spoken for a first time. Which is perfectly within his power, right?
Yeah, perfectly within his power.
And it doesn't say that somebody can't speak twice. It just says that everybody gets to speak once before that guy speaks twice.
Got it.
So debate is going on and on and on, and the worshipful master doesn't have a life, so he's just letting it continue forever. Right? And you are a newlywed and want to get home.
Yes.
How do you stop it?
I don't know. How do I stop it?
So how do you debate?
How do I end a debate?
Yeah. How do you make the discussion stop when it just keeps going?
Well, I think the lodge can say that was enough, and then no, he just stops the discussion.
The lodge says that?
The worshipful master, the chair.
Right. Okay. But if he doesn't, you can stand up and suggest that it's been enough. And you can say, yeah, sure. You can say, worshipful master, I call the question.
I call the question.
It can also be, I move the previous question. At which point, the worshipful master should, and you have to be specific of whether you're calling the question. If things are gotten very complicated, way more complicated than they ever will in your lodge, you have to be specific of whether you're calling the question on the amendment to the amendment, or the main motion. Yeah, if you're calling it on the main motion, you vote on the amendment to the amendment. If it succeeds, you vote on the amendment to the amendment, then the amendment, then the main motion. But first, you have to vote on whether or not to stop debate.
But what if the amendment to the amendment fails?
Right, then it goes away, and you're voting on the amendment.
You still got to vote to the other one.
You have to vote on
the amendment. So you still follow it all the way back,
right,
to the original. Oh, okay, cool.
To the original one, however modified it gets along the way.
Right.
So you call the question. Calling the question requires a second. Now, here's a nifty trick that not enough worshipful masters use. And again, you should check the rules of your jurisdiction, because it may be that you are specifically required to have a vote on these things. But in many cases, we don't have to go through voting. If it's become clear that the lodge is unanimous in its opinion, and I mean unanimous, then you can just say, without objection, or are there any objections? Hearing none, pause again, in case somebody goes, oh, wait, I just woke up. Hearing none, we do it with minutes, right?
Right.
We say, are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Hearing none, they're approved as read.
Huh.
Right? So without objection is a really powerful tool that if you watch C-SPAN, do you ever watch C-SPAN?
Sadly, I watched C-SPAN and I watched PMQ.
I love PMQ.
No, nobody loves PMQ more than me. I'm just letting you know.
We'll talk about an incident in Prime Minister's Question Time in a second. But the in the United States Senate or the United States House, you'll often hear them say, in the House, it's, Mr. Speaker or Mr. Chairman, depending on if they're doing committee of the whole or if it's actually those. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks. That's because the congressional record, they can correct mistakes that they made before it ends up in print, and they can extend their remarks. So they only have 30 seconds to speak because time is limited. Well, they can put a 7-page speech in there.
Yeah.
But they have to ask consent. And so you'll hear the chairperson say, without objection, so ordered. Bang. And then they give their comments, right?
Right.
So without objection can be a really powerful tool if you know how to use it correctly. So let's say the conversation is going on and you realize that you've gotten confused about something and you have a question.
Okay.
And the Brother Smith is the guy who can answer your question. He's sitting over there across the lodge for you. He's sitting in the north, a place of darkness, and you're sitting in the south, and you want to ask Brother Smith a question. What do you do?
I'm guessing I can't just stand up, wait to be recognized, and say, I have a question for Brother Smith.
Right. Because why not?
No idea.
The only person you're talking to in lodge is the worshipful master.
Okay.
That keeps it from becoming personal. So I don't turn around and say, your idea, Nick, is awful. Instead, I say, worshipful master, the idea that we should do this is awful.
Yeah.
It keeps it a little less personal, right? So instead, what you should do is say to the worshipful master, I have a question, blah, 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 blah. I believe Brother Smith has the answer.
Okay.
And then the worshipful master can, if he chooses, say, Brother Smith, do you know anything about this? And Brother Smith can answer and we can move on. But you don't. So the reason is that you're not the chair. You can't recognize Brother Smith to have him stand up and answer your question, right?
Because I'm not the chair. Yeah.
Right. Well, and things can get really out of control with that. Because then what happens is people start to have conversations. and all of a sudden you have three people talking at the same time and no one can tell what's going on. It gets really messy. So in order to keep the control, you ask the chair the question and then hint to the chair that Brother Smith is the one who has the answer. Right? Or if Brother Smith is known to be very smart, you can simply ask the question, sit down, and expect that Brother Smith will stand up, expecting to be able to volunteer that information.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So voting. I think at this point we're going to transition into David's pet peeves.
Can't wait.
Here's something that I despise. All those who are in favor, vote by the usual sign. Motion carries. What's wrong with that?
It didn't count those who abstained.
Or those who voted against.
Oh yeah, vote. Yeah.
Right. Robert's Rules of Order, the wording in the traditional version of Robert's Rules of Order is no vote shall be valid save both the ayes and nays shall be called. In other words, you can't have a vote and not ask for both sides to vote.
Right, of course.
Because you don't know, like you may think everybody is on board, but until you ask, you don't really know. Right? We don't ask for abstentions. And depending on the jurisdiction, we know that in most jurisdictions, Masons aren't allowed to abstain if they're present from voting on certain matters.
Right.
You're required if you're present to vote. That doesn't extend to everything, but our culture as Masons is very much that we expect guys to vote on stuff, right?
Right.
Another pet peeve of mine, and this is very prevalent in some places, is when people stand up and say, "Worshipful Master, to you and through you to the craft," blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that the craft are listening in.
Yeah.
You don't have to say that. Just say, "Worshipful Master, blah, 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 blah." The craft know they're supposed to be listening,
Yeah,
right?
I hate that line.
Yeah, I don't know how that crept in. That crept in there from government speak because city councils will do it in order to circumvent the rules a little bit, in order to talk to like the city manager. So they'll say the mayor is the chair of the city council, which is an arrangement in a lot of cities. They'll say, "Mr. Mayor, to you and through you to the city manager, I would like to know blah, blah, blah." And it's a little way of circumventing the rule. But it's really unnecessary in Lodge for the most part, most of the time. There is a strong rule in Robert's Rules of Order against certain kinds of insults.
As there should be.
Yeah, I agree. One that surprises people is that you are not allowed to call someone a liar. You're just not allowed to do it. So the best example of this from the profane world that I have ever seen in my life was I was watching Prime Minister's Question Time when John Major, I can't believe you watched Prime Minister. My respect for you has just gone up 5-6 notches.
Jessica hates it. She hates listening. And I'm just like, this is the greatest TV show of all time.
Oh my God. I so wish US presidents, can you imagine US presidents having to face that kind of questioning in that kind of environment?
Can you just imagine Paul Ryan saying, "Order! Order!"
So when John Major was prime minister, Tony Blair was leader of the opposition. And I have no idea what they were talking about. I don't remember at all. But John Major was answering some question, and Tony Blair stood up. And when the leader of the opposition stands, he's automatically recognized. He's the next opposition speaker automatically in order. He jumps the queue because he's the leader. And so I think her name was Booth. Betsy Booth was speaker for the House of Commons. And she doesn't have a gavel or anything. What happens is when she stands up, all of her pages stand up and everybody else sits down and it's quiet, okay? And it's important to the story. So John Major finished answering the question and Tony Blair stood up and Betsy Booth said, "Mr. Blair." And Tony Blair said, "That is a lie." Now that is not allowed. It's not allowed in the House of Commons. It's not allowed in Congress, and it should not be allowed in a lodge, right? So Betsy stood up, and all her pages stood up, and she said, "No, no, no, surely not a lie." And Tony Blair did that little half bow thing that you can only do if you're British and you have the extra 2 vertebrae in the back of your. And he did that little half bow, and he said, "Madam Speaker, you are quite correct. I meant to say that the Prime Minister is gravely mistaken." Which was his way of calling the Prime Minister a liar and then sort of apologizing for it and saying, yeah, he's just made a mistake, right? Because he's not allowed to call him a liar. We shouldn't call one another liars in lodge. It's unseemly.
Right.
You have to assume that your brothers are good men who are doing their best,
Yeah.
sometimes under difficult circumstances, that they're speaking from their heart, that they're saying the truth as they know it. They may be wrong, but they're not liars. In general, we should proceed with the assumption that everybody is a person of goodwill in our lodge, right? That it seems like a lodge should be a place where that should be the rule. Parliamentary procedure helps put a little bit of fencing around that so that even when we're in the heat of the moment, we avoid making the kinds of mistakes that get people really rolling.
Right.
So what have you seen in a lodge that was confusing or distracting, or where you saw the lodge get bogged down and they didn't know how to go forward?
I would say when someone's arguing against the motion, but they don't have an answer to the they're just saying that they don't like. Basically, they're just saying that they don't like the idea, and they're going into their back pocket and trying to pull out every excuse that might work, when really they're just wasting everybody's time, and then everybody gets pissed off, and then everybody just wants to go home, and then now everybody's like a sourpuss now.
Right. Unfortunately, one of the things that's hard to avoid is having somebody present false arguments in lodge. I mean, we would hope the Masons, as admirers of the seven liberal arts and sciences, would practice good logic and good rhetoric, right?
Right.
But it's really hard to enforce that. The best that you can do is have the worshipful master keep a tight rein on debate and cut people off when they start getting repetitive.
Yeah.
Because that happens a lot. I think often people get confused in lodge, including, the worshipful master gets confused about where we are in a process or how to move forward in the process. And I think if you just remember you can only talk about one thing at a time,
Right.
that helps. We're not talking about the carpeting today. We're talking about the doors. We may talk about the carpeting tomorrow. Today is the doors, right? And if you can just keep people focused on one topic, that prevents them from dragging everything into the same conversation, right? I also think you often get in lodges, you get people who don't understand the difference between having emotion on the floor and just opening up for a general conversation about how life is going for them today.
Right.
So the worshipful master should lock people down and remind them what they're actually supposed to be talking about. And if worshipful masters do that, then the lodge will be clearer and more in order. Now, because we're Masons and we give the chair a lot more authority than chairs would have in the profane world, you can often, if you're a worshipful master, you often get your way, right?
Yeah. I think it's more the worshipful. What do you mean?
Well, if the worshipful master really wants something,
Okay.
in general, if he's in the chair and he's persuasive, he can get his way frequently. Not always, but most of the time.
I've never seen that. I've never seen a worshipful master get voted no. Well, I guess I don't think I've ever seen a worshipful master present an idea. It's always been somebody else. I've seen worshipful masters Yeah. No, I've never seen the Worshipful Master present something that.
Well,
that
but
they didn't know.
often it's known what the Worshipful Master wants, right?
Right.
Everybody in the lodge
Yeah, everybody
knows.
knows.
Yeah, that's not that John is making the motion, but it's really Charles's idea. And
Yeah.
Charles is the Worshipful Master. And then the Worshipful Master may talk about why he likes that idea.
Right.
So you know, and generally we give guys in the East the benefit of the doubt. We tend to go along with them, right?
So they don't have to be biased or unbiased, I should say.
No.
Hmm.
We don't. That's not something we ask of them. Now they have to be bound by the vote of the lodge, right?
Hmm.
So if they want to send $50 to the French Foreign Legion, and the lodge is like, no, then when the lodge votes no, the Worshipful Master, that's it.
It's no.
It's done.
Hmm.
But usually the Worshipful Master gets his way.
What if somebody's arguing about something? Well, what if there's a motion on the floor and it's just gotten crazy and it's gotten late, nobody's reined it in, and we'll do the first example is anybody, and then the second person will say the Worshipful Master says, brother, we're going to talk about this at the next meeting.
Okay. So if you're a member of the lodge and you want to put it off to the next meeting, that's called postponing to a date certain. There's also postponing to a date uncertain.
So surprising.
But postponing to a date certain is we will take this up at the next stated communication, right?
Right.
So that's the motion. And that's a motion that's a procedural motion that takes precedence over the main motion. Basically, Robert's Rules of Order, you can find complex charts of what comes before what. But if you just stop and think about it, a motion to put off voting has to be voted on before the motion itself, right?
Right.
So at that point, that becomes the motion before the lodge if it's seconded. And the Worshipful Master can simply say, brethren, is it the will of the lodge that we discuss this at the next stated communication? Of course, the Worshipful Master has the power to table everything, so he can say, no, I want this done tonight, and push that off. But generally, I think Worshipful Masters try to gauge the temper of the lodge and make it work. If it's the Worshipful Master wanting to do it in a Masonic context, he can simply say, I'm tabling this to our next regular communication, right?
Right.
If he wants, or let's say we're working outside of a Masonic context just because most of us are members of other things as well, then the proper thing for him to do would be to say, is there a motion to table this until our next regular communication?
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. The chair can always solicit a motion. He can also, a good chair who knows parliamentary procedure, and there's nothing that stops you from reading the little guidebooks on it. There's Parliamentary Procedure for Dummies and all of those, helpful little guides. A good chair who knows how parliamentary procedure works will listen to what somebody wants to have happen and then rephrase it in the proper way for them. So if you stand up and you're like, this is just going on forever, can we just put this off until next week? He'll say, are you making a motion to postpone debate until the next regular communication of this lodge? At which point you'll say, yeah, that's what I wanted.
Yeah, totally. That's what I was saying.
That's what I said. Isn't that what I said? Right. It is important if you're a Worshipful Master and you don't know anything about parliamentary procedure, get one of those little guidebooks or something and read it. You don't have to memorize the whole thing. Just get the general idea and flow of things. Goodwill will take you a long way. Even if you do something wrong in a lodge, as long as you're working with people and trying to keep what's happening clear for everybody and trying to keep everybody on one topic at a time, you'll do much better than most lodges manage.
Do you think, so you know how like everybody gets an opinion? That's honestly my biggest pet peeve. Bob says he likes it, Joe says he likes it, Steve says it. Everybody like thank you for the 20 minutes of nothings.
Right.
Do you think the members of the lodge should have more or less power on voting for stuff than the officers of the lodge?
Oh, the same.
The same?
You're all just members. Officers just have some additional responsibilities, right?
Right.
I think what happens in Masonic lodges, generally speaking, the behind the scenes, how the sausage is made part,
Sausage. Masons. Just a pancake.
yeah, how the pancakes are made. You're right. Is that the officers frequently meet in between lodge meetings,
Right.
and even if it's for a rehearsal, they talk about the stuff that's going to come up. Right.
Yeah.
It's just natural for them to talk. So stuff tends to get vetted through the officers in an informal way before coming to the lodge. But in terms of formal power, I think the officers are just members of the lodge who happen to have accepted additional responsibilities, with the exception of the worshipful master. And in some jurisdiction, the wardens who have particular responsibilities when the lodge isn't in session. They form the standing committee of the lodge and can take certain actions when the lodge isn't in a meeting.
Huh. I learned a lot today.
Really?
How to better craft our way. This is what happens because we all know feelings and emotions just get into it, and then now you're just arguing against something because you're pissed off, and you're just like, no, I'm against it. When really you're not thinking about it. You're just pissed off and trying to go for it.
And I think part of what parliamentary procedure tries to do, and part of what the culture of our lodge. So I have joked with candidates when I was doing candidate education that Masonic lodges try to keep things so trivial, so completely unimportant in the context of the profane world, that nobody could ever get upset about something that happens in a Masonic lodge. And really, we try to shut out all that other stuff, right?
Yeah.
But because we're human beings, we do an imperfect job of reading in our emotions. And sometimes people do get their feelings hurt. But a lot of what we do in terms of courtesy towards one another, in terms of respect for the chair,
Right.
in terms of proper form of address, all of that is just an attempt to layer on enough politeness that when you are feeling agitated, you have to work. Your reflex is polite. You extend the courtesies out of habit so that your agitation has a chance to calm down before it comes flying out of your mouth.
Before it comes flying, and then you're really in trouble.
Yeah, and nobody wants to hurt anybody's feelings in lodge.
Right.
I genuinely believe that people don't want to hurt people's feelings. Brothers want to be considerate and compassionate. And that guy who's standing up and is droning on and on and on wants to be heard for some reason.
Right.
Whether it's simply because he needs to feel like he contributed, or because he honestly thinks he has something that people need to hear, whether he's right about that or not, or because he thinks that there's some value that he's contributing to the proceedings.
Yeah.
Whatever the case is, there's some reason he's standing up and doing that. We should probably try to be a little more gentle with people and patient with them in that regard. That said, I get really annoyed when the 40th person stands up to agree with these.
To agree.
Yeah,
I think,
as the previous 39 brethren said, there's no reason to do that. If they've made the point you want to make, just let it go. Let it go.
Do you think the lodges should adopt a hear thing?
No, because then the guy, what will inevitably happen, because we're Masons and we value harmony above everything else, is that the hearing will become automatic, right?
Okay.
Because you don't want to hurt that guy's feelings because he didn't hear any hears.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it will become, everybody has to get, so it will be, we say hear 3 times after everyone's speaking.
Oh, yeah.
Bad idea.
Hate that.
Yeah. So I think just, assume that everybody has heard you. If they've made a good point, if someone has made a good point, you don't have to repeat that point. Oh, yeah. That's not hard, right?
Right.
And I do think that we have, we have the advantage that we're generally better behaved than the Taiwanese parliament, where they evidently, according to YouTube anyway, have occasional fistfights on the floor. We have managed to be better. I think we're better than the Prime Minister's Question Time most of the time.
What? No way. That's
We're less mean. We're
less mean, but
I love Prime Minister's Question. I love the fact that so
we should probably tell what Prime Minister.
yeah. So in the UK, there is an hour set. I think it's 1 hour a week
Wednesdays.
on Wednesdays set aside when the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom stands at his dispatch box in the House of Commons, and members have submitted questions in advance that they wish him to answer. But that's kind of a fib, because the custom has become that you will ask a question like, what will be the Prime Minister's schedule on March 1st?
Yeah, I've seen that.
And then the Prime Minister will say, he has it written on a card in front of him. In addition to my duties in this House and meetings with ministerial colleagues, I will be conducting the business of Her Majesty's government as may be required on that date. And then he sits back down, or something of that sort. It's very rote. And then they'll say, they get a follow-up question.
Right.
But the follow-up question has to be related to the first question.
Mm-hmm.
So the way they fudge this, because what they're trying to do is catch him off guard and get an answer that will embarrass him if they're the opposition. So they'll ask the question like, will the Prime Minister find time in his schedule to address the urgent issue of whatever?
Homeless outside, whatever. Yeah.
And then the Prime Minister stands up, and you'll see him flip through a big notebook,
massive,
where he has like all the answers to everything that he thinks he's going to be asked.
Yeah.
And every now and then, a Prime Minister will completely flub a question, and it'll be all over the news the next day. You know, Prime Minister flubs. You know, embarrassment for government. And that is oftentimes the goal. Or worse, the Prime Minister will say something that is untrue. And it will be, Prime Minister lying to Parliament, or, so, even if it's a mistake that he makes, it's considered very embarrassing if he.
Yeah.
So that's Prime Minister's Question Time. You can find it on C-SPAN. It's fabulous to watch, if only for just the ceremony of it, because it's very ceremonial.
Yeah. Oh, I love it, man.
And I also love that they call on people by their seat.
Right.
So, and often British constituencies have really lovely names that we would never have in the United States.
Yeah.
We have the 6th Congressional District. They have the member for Lower Falls onto Upney and things like that. And it's great to hear all that stuff. For Americans, it's a lot of fun to watch and note how much more clever their politicians must be than the average.
Right. Oh, and it's also on YouTube. You said C-SPAN, but.
Oh, yeah. So is there anything else?
I think that's it.
So in conclusion, I would just say that the most important thing that we have to remember in terms of parliamentary procedure and lodges is to be kind to one another.
I think Dr. Jordan Peterson had a thing about that, is when you're talking to somebody, always try to imagine that they know something that you don't.
I think just imagine, how you would feel in similar circumstances, and try to extend to them the courtesy and kindness that you would hope would be extended to you. It's not that hard to avoid embarrassing a brother or squishing his hopes.
Yeah.
Or making him feel awkward in lodge. And if you do make a mistake, and you see that you've hurt somebody in lodge, be quick to apologize.
Right.
An apology doesn't cost you anything, and it can restore a brother's sense of belonging to the lodge.
Yeah.
And that's really important. That's something that we don't want to take away from people. And I know, frequently it's the same brothers over and over and over again that push our buttons and get us to, I had a colleague once who is a clinical psychologist, a really, really insightful and smart person, say, that the reason family is so good at pushing your buttons is because they're the ones who installed them.
Oh.
And it's kind of true, right?
It's really true.
But I think with some of our brothers, the reason that brother pushes your buttons is because he is family as well.
Yeah.
So treat them like they're family. And I think at this point, we should point out that we're wearing really snazzy bow ties.
I love my new bow tie. Where did you get your new bow tie?
From this great guy named Edgar at Masonic Revival.
Masonic Revival.
Masonic Revival. Google it. They have great ties. It's a little hard to see, but there's a pattern of square and compasses for the members of my mother lodge. No G.
No G. Yeah, you can't. It's really. It's like the.
It's very subtle.
Yeah, it's like that. Yeah, I can't even describe it. Yeah, you can't even tell.
So my mother lodge, the seal predates the anti-Masonic period, so it doesn't have a G on it.
Sure.
So members of my lodge, because it's harder to find stuff with no G on it in America, they tend to collect on it.
Yeah.
So he even has no G stuff. And look at yours.
I know.
It's bright red.
I got a red one for chapter, and it might have a chapter thing on it. I actually forgot.
That has a square and compasses, and I think acanthus flowers.
Oh, and it's a self-tie bow tie.
I know.
It's the best
Look
part.
at that.
Because real men wear self-tie bow ties.
Real men know how to tie a bow tie.
Yeah.
You know, we should do an episode where we teach guys how to tie a bow tie.
Yeah. You know how many bow ties I had to tie this week for Masons? Oh, it also has the level. Huh.
Oh, yeah. Look.
Wait,
Level.
oh, and the square. Okay, this is really cool now.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked it, but now this is even better. Anyway, we'll put a link. Check them out. They weren't expensive, and
he's been very kind to Three Distinct Knocks, so
yes,
we are very grateful to him.
very grateful. We want to thank him for that.
And I encourage anything that helps Masons dress better.
Yes, that should be a whole episode by itself. Wear a real bow tie. Dress appropriately.
We can have Brother Baruti on to talk about dressing appropriately.
No, because that's not a level anybody can match. We should have like realistic expectations. Like, let's have Superman on and tell us about life lessons. Like, that's not right. Anyway, all right, let's close. That's you.
Okay. The fantastic photography on our website is courtesy of Brother Aaron Sherman. Our theme song is currently under development. Well, no longer. It's composed by worshipful Christopher Duggan. Our website is maintained, curated, and lovingly tended by Brother Nicholas Harvey. Essential canine supervision is provided by Zach
and Raksha, or Zach and
Falula. Yeah.
Yeah.
Raksha's at my house today. The opinions expressed in this podcast and on our website are those of individual contributors and do not represent the opinions of any lodge, Grand Lodge, or other Masonic body. Before I continue, I have to thank our many Patreon sponsors, including but not limited to Bill Strutner,
Yeah.
Adam Roth, Jacob Savlik, Arthur. Oh, I wish he would just call and tell us how to pronounce his last name.
I wonder if he listens to us and be like, I'm not calling you bastards.
Arthur Shillington.
Schillingting.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a fake name.
Patrick, yeah, he did it just to cause us trouble. Well worth the money. Patrick Harvey and Christopher Patty, and a special thank you to the members of my mother lodge who generously contributed to keep Three Distinct Knocks going. I was incredibly touched that they would send actual money from actual lodge coffers to keep Three Distinct Knocks going. That was incredibly sweet. So Amicable Lodge is another Patreon of Three Distinct Knocks. Take us out.
I'm Nicholas Harvey, and I'm incredibly thankful for the brothers that made this podcast and my Masonic journey so rich, interesting, challenging, and fulfilling. I hope Three Distinct Knocks has helped you make some daily progress in Freemasonry. Thank you for listening.